Hello, this is Johnny M. in Winston speaking to you from the fabulous Casa de Johnny in beautiful Van Nuys, California. I'm sure you enjoyed this year's Christmas story. Francis Fisher, Amy Ball, and Harmony Sanchez were all wonderful sports, and I think we all learned a thing or two about each other. You all know that I suffered a heart attack this year, but most of you haven't heard the actual story of how it happened. Those of you who have, feel free to forward to the year in photo section below us. There are a lot of cute pictures of Winston. For those of you who haven't, and that's the majority of you, sit back, relax, and prepare to hear the story of Johnny's heart attack. It all started on December 20th of last year. I was getting ready to have brunch with three geniuses that I frequently dine with, and I felt massive pain in my chest and my right arm. Now, since I'm really smart, I immediately jumped to the conclusion that I had heartburn. So I went ahead and drove to the restaurant where I was going to meet my three geniuses. We had a nice time discussing the events of the day. All the while I was complaining about the massive heartburn that I was suffering. And I mean massive. It was agonizing pain. And my three geniuses said, "Wow, that sounds really bad. You should do something about that." Until finally, I was in such pain that I said, "Guys, I can't continue. I've got to go home and lie down." And they said, "You know what, buddy? You go ahead and you take care of that heartburn because it sounds really painful." Three geniuses. So I'm driving back home and it actually crossed my mind, I wonder if I'm having a heart attack. Maybe I should go to the emergency room. But the last time I had gone to the emergency room, some years ago, I had to pay $1,500 in fees. So I said, I don't want to go to the emergency room and pay $1,500 just to be told that I have heartburn. And I've always heard that when you have a heart attack, you have massive pain in your chest and your left arm. But I was having massive pain in my chest and my right arm. So I knew I couldn't be having a heart attack. I'm really smart. So I went back home and I lied in bed with little Winston beside me to comfort me, and I just laid there in horrendous pain. Horrendous pain. And I thought, oh God, please let this heartburn be over so that I can just go back to living my life. And sure enough, about the late afternoon, the pain started to subside and I felt much better, and I thought, this is great. I stuck it to the man. I don't have to pay $1,500 to go to the emergency room. So I actually went out to the movies that night. I went to see Star Wars. I felt very good about myself because I toughed it out, I manned it through, and I'd gotten through my heartburn. So I thought. Over the next few days, the agonizing pain returned several times. This is the type of pain, a lot of people who've heard this story, they've told me afterwards, oh, since you told me that, I've had chest pain and I've wondered if I'm having a heart attack too. Believe me, the pain I'm talking about is the most agonizing, intense pain that I've ever gone through. It's not like some dull little, ouch in your chest. It is like somebody kicked you repeatedly with an iron boot. That's how bad it was. So I finally decided, okay, I'd better talk to a doctor. Unfortunately, the doctor I spoke to was my friend Mark, who has a PhD in theater. Mark advised me, well, it sounds to me like you should take some Pepto-Bismol. So I said, oh, that's a good idea. So we went to the drugstore and I got some Pepto-Bismol. I shotgunned the bottle and I said, that's great. I took care of it. I took care of business and I did the right thing. I sought medical advice and we went out and had Mexican food. But it really didn't work out that way. And I was talking to my friend Donna a day or two later and she said, dude, you've got to go to a doctor. And I mean a medical doctor, not some idiot who writes books about Aeschylus. And since Donna frankly scares the hell out of me, I said, okay, as soon as my doctor's back from the holidays, I'll take care of it. So on January 3rd, my doctor's back. I go to his office, and my doctor's a very nice man, and I tell him, Doc, I've been having really intense heartburn, so if you could give me some prescription strength Pepto-Bismol, I'll be on my way. And he said, well, let me give you an electrocardiogram. Let's see what's going on. I thought, well, it seems a little intense for heartburn, but he's just being thorough, so okay. Hooked me up to the EKG, and he did, and he got a printout, and he took a look at it, and he said, there's a cardiologist in the building next door. I want you to go over there right now. And I thought, okay, he's just being thorough. We'll go over to the cardiologist, and then we'll get our Pepto-Bismol, and that'll be that. So, go to the cardiologist, and he's very nice. They let me in without an appointment, even though they're jammed. You know, I have to wait around for a little while, 15 minutes. I'm waiting in the exam room. And he finally comes in, and he's a funny doctor. He's a nice man, but he's a funny doctor. The first thing he does is he picks up the printout of the EKG, looks at it for half a second, and says, "You've had a heart attack!" and then leaves. And so I'm all alone, and I laugh at that, because I figure, okay, it's just heartburn, that's fine, he's having a good time, so it's no problem. So I wait around for 5 more minutes, and then he comes back, and he looks at the printout in earnest, and he says, "You've had a heart attack. I want you to go to the hospital right now, preferably by ambulance." Shit gets real fast. He's in the office arranging it with my insurance company to get approval for the procedures I have to go through, and he says they normally take 48 hours to approve them, but we don't have that kind of time with you. So he's in there talking to the insurance company. In the meantime, I'm in the exam room making frantic phone calls to take care of my life while I'm subtly in the hospital. First person I call is Donna, and I have a meltdown with her, and she's wonderful. She talks me out of it. She is very rational, very understanding, and very helpful, and she agrees to take care of Winston, which is the reason I called her. And she says, "Don't even give it a second thought. I'll go to your house. I'll get Winston. He'll stay with me for as long as he needs to. I don't even want you to worry about it. It'll be fine." I'm in the midst of doing a play called Timeshare, written by my friend Steve Green and directed by Steve. And it had been off for 3 weeks as a holiday hiatus, and it was about to start again. So I have to get word to Steve that I can't do the show. So Steve says, "It's no problem. I'll take over your role, and don't even think about it." So and it's great. He tells me that on his first performance he managed to fuck up all of my lines in the second act. So it's exactly like if they had seen me in the performance in the first place. That was a hard part to learn. And then I call my boss. And he's very understanding and says, "Okay, don't worry. We'll take care of it while you're gone for as long as you need to be out." I just put up a picture of Ebenezer Scrooge because I thought it would be funny, but he was actually very nice about it. And then my doctor says, "Okay, we'll let you go to the hospital without an ambulance, but we need somebody to come and pick you up and drive you. You can't drive because there's a chance you may have another heart attack on the way." Holy shit. So I call up Bro Joe, and I say, "Dude, would you please come get me, because I just had a heart attack and I need to be taken to the hospital." Now, Joe is kind of a latter-day hippie. I mean, he does things like go to vision quests and hang out in Indian teepees and climb mountains. And he doesn't own a car because that's too plastic fantastic Madison Avenue for his lifestyle. But he tears himself away from the Starbucks that he's writing his history of socialism that he's been working on for 30 years, and he comes on his bicycle and pedals over and gets me, and he's just a godsend. I mean, he talks to the doctor, and he's asking all these questions while I'm freaking out. And finally we get in my car, and he drives me to the hospital, and they admit me. And then they take me into a little room. And when I say a little room, I mean that a lot of you have closets that are bigger than this room that they took me to. And I'm lying in the little room, lying on a little couch. I've got an IV of morphine hooked up to me because they want to slow down my heart so that it's not beating too fast to sort of stop the chance of another heart attack happening. That's how high risk I was. And they take blood and they do tests. And a male nurse comes in, one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he says, "Okay, we've taken your test, and you definitely had a heart attack, probably 2 or 3. because what happens when your heart stops is that your heart releases a chemical which stays in your chest, and that way we know you've had a heart attack. And there wasn't a lot of residual chemical in there, probably because you waited so long to get medical attention. It had been 2 weeks since my heart attack. He didn't add "you fucking asshole," which I probably would have in my mind at least, but he was very nice, and he said, yes, you definitely had a heart attack. And then he proceeds to sit down in a chair next to my couch, next to my cot, and hold my hand. Now the shit is very real, very fast, because I've got a complete stranger holding my hand in this little room, and I'm thinking, I'm going to die in this room. There's no way around it. I've reached the final curtain, and this is it. Lights out. And I started taking stock of my life. And I thought about the tools I'd been given and what I'd used them for. And I was okay with it. I really concluded that, okay, if this is all the time I have, I'm all right with how I live my life. And that was a good thing to come to a conclusion of. But those of you watching this video have probably figured out by now already, I didn't die. I managed to survive through the little room, and they finally wheeled me into a big, nice, private room that was going to be my bedroom for the first night. I was in a hospital bed. Joe joined me. You know, we're goofing around, telling stories, telling jokes, taking funny pictures. And then a nurse comes in and looks around and says, "Oh, they gave you the nice room. This is the room that we give patients who have infectious diseases." And then she catches herself and says, "Oh, don't worry. We clean it up very thoroughly between each patient." So it's like I'm thinking, oh, great. Okay, this is the room that they put people with infectious diseases in. So I'm lying in my bed. I've got another IV, this time of blood thinners, hooked up to me. And finally, you know, it's a lighthearted thing with me and Joe. At around 10 o'clock, I finally said, "Joe, you can leave. It's really, there's no reason for you to stay any later." And he says, "Really, you don't mind?" I don't mind, because I'm used to, you know, sleeping on the ground in teepees and stuff. It's really no problem. And he's so wonderful. But I said, no, it's fine. You go home, and I'll be fine. I'll just stay here the night. And so I left. And then what proceeded was easily the worst night of my life. I was just lying in this hospital bed, hooked up to this IV. I've got a little plastic bottle to pee in, and I'm laying there thinking, okay, I'm either going to die from my heart stopping all of a sudden, or else I'm going to catch one of the infectious diseases that was left here by the last guy who died here. So I'm just, frankly, I'm horrified. They make you lay flat on your back. You're not even allowed to have a pillow because they don't want your blood circulating too much. They want it evenly distributed throughout your body, so you have to lie incredibly still, incredibly flat on your back all night. And a nurse would come in once an hour to check on me, but other than that, it was just me and my dark thoughts. And then the worst was it seemed like it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I start to hear hysterical crying from an adjacent room, and somebody screaming, "Aunt Joan! Aunt Joan! Aunt Joan!" And it's obvious to me that Aunt Joan is next door, leaving this mortal coil, which, for all I know, I'm about to do the same very quickly. It was a heavy experience, but the nurses kept coming in. None of them made any reference to Aunt Joan, and I didn't ask about it. But night finally turned into day, and they said, "Okay, we're going to give you an angiogram today." So they wheeled me through a labyrinth of sterile white hallways, and until finally I was in what seemed like the bowels of the hospital, and they took me into this stainless steel laboratory. And there's a bunch of lab technicians all in operating gear and masks. Must have been 20 of them, and they're just standing around. And they wheeled me into the room, and the first person I encounter is this nurse who says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to give you an angiogram. So we're going to put a camera in through your wrist, put it up your arm, into your chest, and we're going to look around and see what the damage is. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is shave your groin. And my response was, and I kid you not, this is a hospital, right? She laughed and said, yes, but we are going in through your wrist, but just in case there's anything wrong with the wrist, our second choice is to go in through your groin, and we need to prep it just in case. It needs to be ready for us just in case. So I said, no, whatever, I wasn't doing anything with it anyway, so go ahead. So they wheel my hospital bed in as far as it can go. I get out. They make me take off all my clothes, which is fine because I have a magnificent body. And they have me lay on this stainless steel examination table. And the nurse, as promised, shaves off all the pubes, which is fine. That's nothing I haven't done before myself, so that's fine. The only thing that disturbs me, I'm looking around at all these technicians, and I'm thinking, I'm paying you, and I'm paying you, and I'm paying you, and I'm paying you. And I go through that with all 20 of them. And that's kind of disconcerting until the doctor comes up, the main doctor, and he says, okay, we're going to do this procedure, and fine. So now everybody asks me, were you able to see the screen? Because that's what I do. My eyes would be glued to the screen. No, what happens is you are so freaked out and so exhausted and so medicated that I wasn't asleep while they were doing the angiogram, but I was totally zoned out. I had no idea what was going on. And then finally, however long it took, and I don't know if it was 15 minutes or 5 hours, literally, I just don't know, the doctor says, okay, we went into your heart and we looked around and we found 99% blockage in one valve. So we were able to put a stent in, and now you have 0% blockage. So we caught it in time, and you're in good shape. It's like, that was pretty amazing. That was like Star Trek, that they were able to go in through my wrist and into my chest and look around and be able to fix the problem without having to operate. It was pretty amazing. So they take me out of the laboratory back through the labyrinths of mazes, and then they take me not back to the infectious disease room. Now they take me to the intensive care unit, because that's just where they take people after having this procedure. And I'm laying around in the intensive care unit. And Joe finally joins me, and we have a little talk. We talk about what's happened, and he takes off. I say, yeah, you don't need to stick around. I'll be fine. So I'm laying around in the intensive care unit, just sort of texting people and just sort of letting the time go by. And about 10 o'clock at night, a shadowy figure walks into my room, and I don't know who it is at first, and I squint and I recognize, oh, it's my friend Harmony Sanchez. She was the only one to visit me in the hospital, and she told me, I was very concerned. I didn't know what to expect when I was coming over. And so what I proceed to do is tell her the story of how I had my groin shaved in the examination room. She's alternately amused and embarrassed, which is the proper reaction whenever I tell any story. And the funniest thing, though, was that there was a male nurse who was also in the room at the time, and he had to listen to my story having my genitals shaved. And I think he was quite amused, but I can't be sure. But he was clearly a captive audience, because he was doing, whatever adjustments and examinations he needed to do, and he just had to overhear this story. But I was very grateful to Harmony for coming in and seeing me. It really lifted my spirits tremendously. And then I was able to get through the night. It was not nearly as scary as the first night. It was not bad at all. I just slept through the night, and then The next day, my third day in the hospital, a person comes in, a couple of people, a nurse and a representative from the drug company, and they give me a list of all the pills that I have to take for the rest of my life, and it's a long list of pills. And the nurse gives me a huge list of food that I am no longer allowed to eat. And I just take it in. It didn't bother me. It was fine. It's like, okay, these are kind of changes that I'd always wanted to make anyway. So I looked at this as an opportunity to live the life that I'd always wanted to live anyway. So that was good. And then they finally wheeled me out of the ICU and into a little sort of room of tents. You're wheeled into a bunch of cloth partitions and just allowed to lay there until they decide that you're ready to go. And it's both incredibly depressing because you're in this time, not even a room. You're surrounded by these tent partitions, laying in the same hospital bed that you've laid in for 3 days, and but it's also good because this is the beginning of the end. So finally, the doctor comes in and says, "Okay, you're okay to go. You need to do this and this and this, but you're in good shape now. You're in good shape." So once again, my savior, Bro Joe, he comes and they wheel me out in a wheelchair, because that's how you always have to leave the hospital. And they take me to my car, and Joe drives me home, and he hangs around for a while, but I was really exhausted at that point anyway, so I said, you just go home. And then that was my first night home, was the second scariest night of my life, because I'm just sort of laying there in bed. Winston is still at Donna's, so I'm all alone, and I'm letting it all soak in, just how precarious this thing we call life is. I mean, 3 days before, I was just a guy with a bad case of heartburn, and here I am laying here, and I'm a heart patient. And there was no history of heart disease in my family. I was in reasonably good shape. It just came from out of nowhere. And I was scared. I was just laying in the dark, and I started to play music just to get my mind off things. I never play music in the bedroom, but I just did it because to silence the demons in my head. And a Sheryl Crow song comes on, one of whose lyrics is, "It's good to be alive." And listening to that, hearing that, hit me like a ton of bricks. That it was something that I'd always taken for granted, but it is good to be alive, and this was the first time that I'd ever really had to think of that as a reality. It's not easy to recover from a heart attack. You don't just, get out of the hospital and that's it. Your heart's undergone major trauma, so you're pretty tired all the time. There's pain. There's uncertainty because your life has been threatened, and then you have to take a lot of pills, which frankly knock you on your ass for about the first 3 months, because your system needs to get used to them. So I was exhausted all the time, and in my case I was suffering from really intense phantom pain in my arm, from my shoulder. Sometimes it was in my elbow, sometimes it was in my back, and it wasn't anything to do with my heart. It was just my brain sending pain signals down there, and it was quite intense, and it continues to be. It's something that I experience to this day, even now. So getting over a heart attack is a challenge. But when my mother died, I wrote a piece about it called The Meaning of Life. And in it, I determined that the meaning of life is that it ends. and it usually ends much sooner than we're ready for. That was certainly almost the case with me. And you might very well be asking right now, well, this is all interesting to a degree, Johnny, but what the hell does it have to do with Christmas, since this is your Christmas message? And Christmas is about celebrating life and about celebrating our relationships with others and our general love for humanity. And the reason that I was able to survive what I survived was threefold. One was the miracle of modern medicine. I mean, it's extraordinary what they could do. You know, the people talk, oh, I wish I lived in such and such an age or such and such a time. Bullshit. Now is the best time to live in because we've got the best medical treatment we ever had. And that was wonderful. The second thing that kept me going was that I never lost my sense of humor. I've always found that whenever I had trials in life, what usually made it worse was that my sense of humor failed me. And if you can maintain your sense of humor in any situation, you are bulletproof. And just the mere fact that I was able to laugh throughout the whole thing and talk about getting my groin shaved and taking funny pictures, that gave me a tremendous advantage in surviving it. And the third thing, of course, was the love and support of my friends. I already told you about Joe and Harmony. A couple of days after it was over, my dear friend Julie came and brought me lunch, and we had a long talk about my tribulations. A few days later, I went to my friend Amy's house, and Amy is she's really into nutrition, and she essentially taught me how to cook real food that grew out of the ground rather than boxes that you microwave that came from the freezer department, and that was wonderful. And I got wonderful text messages and wonderful gift baskets and wonderful flowers from so many people just to let me know that I mattered and they were concerned, and that meant so much to me in my recovery and to this day. It's funny, if you're anything like me, you think about life and maybe you get frustrated sometimes because you're not as far along as you think you ought to be. You haven't accomplished as much as the next guy. But the reality is that we start life as an ejaculation, which is a great way to start anything. But we're a single sperm, and we have to compete with hundreds of millions of other sperms just for the chance to fertilize an egg. And if we beat those, 1 in 600,000 odds that we can fertilize an egg, then that egg has to attach itself to a uterine wall. Then we have to spend 9 months in a very uncertain process to develop into a starter human being. And then once we beat those incredible odds and we actually manage to crawl out into the life and start our lives, we have already undergone so much that nothing that we encounter throughout our lives is ever going to come close to challenging it. So the mere fact that we are human beings able to be on this earth talking to each other is a miracle in itself. And then anything else that we discover, that we are the victories, that we triumph, the failures that teach us, those are all gravy. Life is just an extraordinary thing to have, and it really is a gift. And my gift has been extended as a result of this experience. Now, I'm not, it wasn't an epiphany. I don't believe in God now, and I didn't before. My philosophy is pretty much the same. I don't feel like I have any more insight than anybody else. I'm certainly not smarter than anybody else because I tried to treat a heart attack by taking Pepto-Bismol. So I'm just as big an idiot as I ever was. But I am extraordinarily lucky that I have the life I have, that I know the people that I know, and that I'm able to continue with it for however much longer that I have. So I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a wonderful New Year, and hope that your life brings you all the joy and contentment that you want it to, and you deserve it to. And that's a lot. So for me and Winston, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.